business that may properly come before the City Council.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for March 23rd, 2026. As a reminder to our participants, you can provide in-person input or virtual audio and written input during tonight's public hearing. Input options during the live meeting include in-person attendees may approach the podium when the mayor asks if there is any public input for the public hearing. Remote attendees can log into GoToMeeting using the login links, phone numbers, and access code that appear on the broadcast and live stream and posted on the front page of the meeting agenda. This option includes audio input and written chat input. If you are participating via computer, indicate that you would like to speak in the chat function. If you are participating via phone, indicate that you would like to speak during the appropriate section. All comments, whether in person or virtual, must be accompanied by a name and address. Additionally, written public input is accepted by contacting the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/council-contacts and through the City Clerk's office email at ctyclerk@cityofdubuque.org. Attendance for the session is as follows. Mayor Kavanaugh?
Here.
Council members Leyendecker?
Here.
Thank you. Resnick?
Here.
Roussel?
Here.
Sprank?
Here.
Staver?
Here.
Wethel?
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan?
Here.
And City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
Thank you. Our public hearing this evening is approving a First Amendment to the Development Agreement between the City of Dubuque, Iowa and Cronin Development Incorporated.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Roussel.
I move to receive and file and adopt the resolution.
Second by Wethel.
Motion by Roussel, second by Wethel. Mike, please.
Thank you. Economic Development Director Jill Connors is recommending City Council adopt the attached resolution approving the First Amendment to the Development Agreement by and between the City of Dubuque and Cronin Development for the construction of a mixed-use building at the corner of 5th and Main Street. Since the execution of the development agreement, the Cronin team has worked with city staff and identified an additional small area of land that is required to square off the northeast corner of the property. In order for the city to convey that property, a First Amendment to the development agreement is required. The amendment has been prepared in order to allow for the following: adding new land to the project, establishing easement areas and revocable and irrevocable license areas, imposing new infrastructure, utility, and permitting obligations, establishing required bonding, inspections, and platting procedures, creating mechanisms for early site access. All other terms and conditions of the original development agreement remain unchanged. I concur with the recommendation and respectfully request Mayor and City Council approval.
Thank you, Mike. We are on a public hearing to consider City Council adopt the attached resolution approving the First Amendment to the Development Agreement by and between the City of Dubuque, Iowa and Cronin Development Incorporated for the construction of a mixed-use building at the corner of 5th and Main Streets. Do we have any public input on this item this evening?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Will Gronin, and I reside at 955 Washington Street, Unit 323. On behalf of Mike Almendinger, President of Kilburn Group, and our team at Gronin, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be a part of what we believe will be a transformative multifamily project located directly across Main Street from the John Ellis Butler College of Osteopathic Medicine. Our teams have appreciated the opportunity to work with the city staff throughout various stages of this development, helping bring us to where we are today. If you have any questions or concerns regarding the project, please do not hesitate to reach out anytime. We would be happy to address them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Will, for your comments. Any other public input this evening? Anything virtually?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other public input, back to us for discussion of questions then. Not seeing any or hearing any. Okay. All right. Well, a motion on the table here is to receive and file and adopt the resolution. So, Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Sprank?
Aye.
Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Wethel?
Aye.
Staver?
Aye.
Leyendecker?
Aye.
Resnick?
Aye.
Roussel?
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
We'll move on to our action item, which is approval of plat of survey of a portion of West 6th Street right-of-way to be known as City Lot 61B in the City of Dubuque, Iowa, for vacating petition.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Wethel.
I move to receive and file and adopt the resolution.
Second.
Motion by Wethel, second by Resnick. Mike, please.
Thank you. City Engineer Gus Ahoyas is recommending City Council approval of the plat of survey vacation of City Lot 61B. I concur with the recommendation and respectfully request Mayor and City Council approval.
Thank you, Mike. This is an action item, so I'll just bring it back to us for discussion at the table. Not seeing or hearing any. All right, motion here is to receive and file and adopt the resolution. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Sprank.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Liondecker.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Our final item is an item set for public hearing, which is setting a public hearing petition to vacate a portion of West 6th Street right-of-way to be known as City Lot 61B in the city of Dubuque, Iowa, for vacating petition for April 6th, 2026.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Wethel.
I move to receive, file, and adopt the resolution and set the public hearing for April 6th, 2026.
Second by Sprank.
Motion by Wethel, second by Sprank. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Sprank.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Liondecker.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. Those three items were the only items on the agenda for this special session, so we actually have another session that starts at 6:30 this evening, but for now, we will be adjourned. Thank you.
Muted.
Adrian N. Breitfelder, City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Monday, March 23rd, 2026 at 6:30 PM in the Historic Federal Building for the purpose of conducting a public hearing on the fiscal year 2027 proposed property tax rate.
Thank you. Good evening, and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for March 23rd, 2026. As a reminder to our participants, you can provide in-person input or virtual audio and written input during tonight's public hearing. Input options during the live meeting include: in-person attendees may approach the podium when the mayor asks if there is any public input for the public hearing. Remote attendees can log into GoToMeeting using the login links, phone numbers, and access code that appear on the broadcast and live stream and posted on the front page of the meeting agenda. This option includes audio input and written chat input. If you are participating via computer, indicate that you would like to speak in the chat function. If you are participating via phone, indicate that you would like to speak during the appropriate section. All comments, whether in person or virtual, must be accompanied by a name and address. Additionally, written public input is accepted by contacting the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/councilcontacts and through the City Clerk's office email at ctyclerk@cityofdubuque.org. Attendance for the session is as follows: Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Leyendecker.
Here.
Thank you. Resnick.
Here.
Roussel.
Here.
Sprank.
Here.
Staver.
Here.
Wethel.
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan.
Here.
And City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
Thank you. Our public hearing this evening is public hearing for the fiscal year 2027 amount of proposed property tax rate in dollars and the fiscal year 2027 budget and fiscal policy guidelines.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Roussel.
I move to receive and file and adopt the resolution.
Second by Wethel.
Got a motion by Roussel, second by Wethel. Mike, please.
Thank you. So I have a presentation to make about the recommendation that I've made for the property tax levy for this fiscal year's budget process. Just a reminder that you're being asked tonight to approve a property tax levy. Whatever levy you approve is the maximum amount that can be levied. You'll see at the end, and I'll go through the number of different hearings you're going to have through the end of April. And then at the end of April, the final public hearing, you have to actually establish the property tax levy. It can be no higher than what you pick tonight, but it can be lower after you learn more information through the budgeting process. So the proposed property tax rate that I'm recommending is this second column, $10.1648, which is a 1% change or 10 cents from the current property tax rate. The property tax asking would go from 29.9 to 32 million in round numbers. That's a change of $2.1 million or 6.93%. The impact on the average residential property would be they would receive a 3% property tax increase or $26.88 for the year. There's other classes of property. This is the commercial class of property, and you can see that because the first $150,000 value receives the residential rollback on commercial property, that there are 773 properties, commercial properties, that would actually see a property tax decrease if you adopt this. Now, the average commercial property would see a $770 increase or 18.1%. Another class of property is industrial. It's a similar situation. They receive a residential rollback on the first $150,000 of value. So in that case, there are 20 industrial properties that would see a property tax decrease, but the average industrial property would see a 17.9% increase or $910.29 a year. When you compare, there's only 11 cities in the state of Iowa with a population greater than 50,000. While we don't have all the fiscal year 27 rates for all these other cities, you can see that when this process is done based on the maximum rate that these other cities are selecting, is Dubuque would still have the lowest property tax rate of the 11 cities in the state of Iowa. When you look at the FY '26 comparison, which many of these have still as the shown levy on here, the rate of Waterloo is 114% higher than Dubuque, so more than double. And the average of the other 10 cities is 53% higher than Dubuque's recommended rate for FY '27. If you put some historical context to it, since 1989, the average homeowner has averaged an annual increase in cost in the city portion of their property taxes of 1.52%, or about $9.92 a year. And now if the state had been fully funding the homestead tax credit, which there was a period of time that they didn't, recently they have been, the increase would have averaged only $7.32 a year. Some significant issues that are impacting the budget. So you got to go back in time to look at some of those issues. So the state of Iowa is talking about doing property tax reform legislation this year, and they say whatever they pass will not affect the FY '27 budget that you're going to be considering, but next year's FY '28 budget. But you need to know this isn't the first time that they've considered property tax reform. So they've been doing this since 2003 when they eliminated the machinery and equipment tax, which was an industrial tax that reduced the city revenues by $200,000 a year. Again, in 2003, they repealed the personal property tax replacement fund. That cost the city of Dubuque $350,000 a year. In 2003, they eliminated the municipal assistance, and this number on this slide is actually wrong. It wasn't a $300,000 annual loss in revenue for the city of Dubuque. It was a $1.2 million loss in annual revenue for the city of Dubuque. Then still back in 2003, the city lost $250,000 a year in liquor sales revenues, which was distributed by the state to cities. And the bank franchise tax was eliminated. The city lost $145,000 a year when that was eliminated. Then in 2013, the business property tax credit was changed. I don't have a number for how that impacted our annual budget. And then there was property tax legislation in 2021, and it was effective July 1st, 2022. And it phased out the state backfill on commercial and industrial property tax replacement. So in a previous legislation where the state had eliminated or actually put in the phase this first $150,000 residential rollback on commercial and industrial, made some other changes. They promised to replace that money each year with a state payment. And then they decided that they weren't going to do that anymore. So the backfill that the city is losing, once it's fully implemented, being phased out in 2030, will be $1.3 million a year. In 2022, the state dealt again with alcohol license revenue, and the city lost $85,000 a year in annual revenues. And here was a really big one. In 2013, the state of Iowa, we used to have another class of property. It was called multifamily residential. So it was all units, 3 units and above, and they were considered commercial property. So like in the past, where commercial property didn't receive any residential rollback, neither did the apartment buildings. And so the state said, okay, over 7 years, we're going to give them a rollback, and at the end of 7 years, that rollback is going to be the same as residential property. And what rollback means is it lessens the amount of the value of your property that is subject to property tax. So our annual revenue loss is $1.2 million a year, and through that 7-year period, and now 2 years since it's actually been fully implemented, we've lost $9.2 million in property tax general fund operating revenue. Then in 2022, They repealed the business property tax credit. The city lost $150,000 in annual revenue for that. And when you total all those numbers up over that period of time, the city has a $5 million annual loss in revenues from all those previous property tax reforms. And the other thing that the state did in 2023 is they consolidated all the municipal levies. They eliminated several optional levies, and there used to, I guess you could say there still is a general fund levy cap at $8.10, but the way the law reads is each year for cities like Dubuque, that cap lessens. So it also minimizes your flexibility on when you apply property taxes. And so we'll see what their legislation will be this year and how that will affect the fiscal year 28 budget. One of the things we're doing is we did some internal loans to support our downtown tax increment financing district. And so we're having those internal loans be repaid by the downtown TIF. That was $5.3 million in internal loans. And so what we're recommending to do with that money is use $1.2 million of it for property tax relief in the current fiscal year. With the remaining $4.1 million, we're recommending that $975,000 go to fund non-recurring improvement package requests from the different departments. And we're also recommending to do an internal loan to the refuse collection fund of $675,000, and that's for vehicle or truck replacements. That would leave $2.4 million, which we're recommending that we leave in extra reserves for the fiscal year 28 budget process, because we don't yet know what property tax reform they're going to pass this year that will affect the fiscal year 28 budget, and we think we should be prepared for that. The other thing we're going to be implementing in December, when each December we're required to file with the state what we're going to claim as far as revenues from the next year's TIF's revenues. We're going to recommend that we file that we're only going to collect 75% of the downtown TIF revenues, and the remaining 25% be returned to taxing bodies, including the city of Dubuque, and that will include $1.2 million to the city. So you have to put that first bullet that I talked about with the second bullet. So you'd say, well, wait a minute, Mike, how can you use a one-time revenue source, the repayment of the $5.3 million in loans, use $1.2 million of that for property tax relief in the current fiscal year? The way we can do that is by only claiming 75% of the TIF next year. Then that becomes a recurring savings, that $1.2 million, or a recurring revenue source, I'm sorry. So that makes it not a non-recurring revenue source. Now there's some consequences to that. As a result, beginning in fiscal year 2028, the Greater Downtown TIF District will have $3.4 million less each year for programs and projects. So when you see the budget recommendation in a couple of weeks, you'll see that I'll be recommending that we reduce the commitment to some of the projects that the mayor and city council had previously wanted to make commitments to, or new projects that there was a possibility to make commitments to. So we'll be sharing that recommendation with you in a couple of weeks. I already talked about the fact that the state is phasing out the backfill over an 8-year period. That's since FY22, that's been an $800,000 annual reduction in our property tax revenues, and or in our general fund revenues, I should say. And this $485,000 that they're still paying will be phased out over the next few years. When you look at our different revenue sources, our DRA lease payments are estimated to decrease by $134,000. Our interest revenue is expected to decrease from $2.3 million down to $1.6 million. And that's basically, I think everybody can see that the interest rates have been falling, so we'll get less return on our money. And also, it's based on how much of our cash balances are available for that investment. Local option sales tax, it's projected to decrease from $6.4 million, which was our projection in FY '26, to $6.2 million, which is our projection for FY '27. Now remember, 50% of the local option sales tax goes to property tax relief, and 50% goes to capital improvements, and 20% for maintenance of city buildings, and 30% for street maintenance. The hotel motel tax is projected to decrease from our FY '26 projections of $3.9 million down to $3.5 million in FY '27. Our riverfront property lease revenue is projected to go up by $101,000. Most of those are tied to the CPI, those increases in lease payments. Our franchise fee revenue is projected to go up over $1 million, or about $1 million, and that's because of the projection we made in fiscal year '26 just was not accurate, and this one we believe is. Our ambulance fee revenues, you'll remember the mayor and city council dealt with this in calendar year 2025, and you saw that our ambulance fee revenues were going to go up about $1 million a year. What you approved was creating 5 new additional firefighter, well, it's the next slide. I'll go to the next slide here in a minute. So you approved creating 5 new firefighter positions in the current fiscal year, and then you were told that through this budget process, we're going to recommend creating 9 additional firefighter positions. That would be partially funded by those fee increases, and then a federal SAFER grant, SAFER. And so we'll be applying for that as soon as the grant cycle opens up. It hasn't opened up yet for this year. If you look at in fiscal year 2022, the authorized strength of the fire department was 92.16, so let's say 92 full-time equivalents, and those are sworn and civilian positions. And in fiscal year '26, which is the current year, we're at 109.16, which is an 18.5% increase in staffing. And if you approve adding this 9 additional positions, it would be a 28% increase in fire department staffing in 4 years, an increase of 26 full-time equivalent positions since fiscal year 2022. So I'm sorry, that'd be 5 years. Our contribution to the municipal fire and police retirement system is decreasing, and that's a calculation we get from the state. We don't have any authority over this contribution level. And then if you look at our employee wage increases, we have 5 union contracts. The union contract with the Dubuque Police Protective Association includes a 5% pay increase. Our contract with the Dubuque Professional Firefighters Association is a 4% increase. Our contract with the International Union of Operating Engineers is a 3.25% increase. And our contract with Teamsters Local Number 120 bus operators and Teamsters Local Number 120, which is basically the public works plow drivers and things like that, that's a 3% wage increase. And non-represented employees, I'm recommending that they get a 3% wage increase. The total cost of those wage increases and the continued implementation of the pay and classification study that the mayor and city council approved last year is a cost of $2.6 million. In health insurance, the city portion of the health insurance is expected to increase from $1,119 per month per contract to $1,175 per month per contract, which is an increase of $421,000. So we're projecting a 5.35% increase in health insurance cost. Effective January 1st, 2027, the premiums paid by employees will increase 5%, so they'll also be they'll be participating in that those increased costs. But if you look at over the last 10 years, we've averaged a 1.2% average annual increase in our healthcare costs. So I'd say we're doing pretty good, and we're looking at 5% this year. When I looked at some information from the state, they said Iowa health insurance premiums for 2026 are seeing significant increases, with average rate hikes ranging from roughly 12% to over 26%. And as I said, we're looking at 5.35% for our health insurance increase. In transit, which is heavily dependent on federal funding, we're looking at a decrease in federal funding of $154,000, decrease in federal transportation administration capital money of $344,000, an increase in employee expense of $121,000, and a decrease in our purchases, supplies, and services of $214,000. You'll remember in July of 2023, Moody's Investor Services upgraded the city's credit rating from AA3 to AA2. And in January 2025, when they reviewed that as we were issuing more debt, they affirmed the city's AA2 credit rating. The higher credit rating means the city can borrow money at lower cost and is outside information of the fiscally responsible decision-making of the mayor and city council. The general fund reserves is projected to be at 27% or $24.6 million in fiscal year 2026. So I'll remind you that your policy is 25% reserve. We target 27% because there's always unexpected things that happen during a fiscal year between revenues and expenses. So we want to create a margin of error. So I'm recommending the maximum property tax dollars in fiscal year 2027 is $31,940,934, or a tax rate of 10.1648, which is 6.93% increase over the fiscal year 2026 property tax dollars. And when you set this public hearing, there were some questions asked about lesser increases. So this slide tries to answer that. If you adopt the 3% increase, you know that there's no decrease or increase from the 3%, which is what I'm recommending. If you only adopt a 2% increase for the average homeowner, that would provide $305,474 less in property tax revenues. And so, of course, that would mean some cuts from the list I gave you of improvement packages that I already am going to be recommending. So I provided that as part of the public document. So if you look at those recurring improvement package lists, you could see that we would have to cut $305,474 from those. Now that doesn't count the 9 firefighter positions because those are funded through their ambulance fee increases. If you only did a 1% increase to the average homeowner, that would reduce property tax revenues by $615,076. And of course, it would be a much deeper cuts than just the improvement packages because I'm only recommending about $300,000 or $400,000 in improvement packages. So then we would have to start going into the meat of the budget beyond just those additional improvements. And if you did no increase to the average homeowner, that would reduce the property tax revenues by $924,677. And those would be, quite frankly, some very, very deep cuts that we would have to recommend to you through the budget process. The current recommendation is the 3% increase for the average homeowner. So as I mentioned to you, whatever you set tonight is the maximum property tax rate. It's not the property tax rate. You're now going to go through a set of hearings. You're going to have, I'll present to you the budget recommendation at your regular city council meeting on April 6th. You're then going to hold 7 public meetings, April 7th, April 9th, April 13th, April 15th, April 16th, April 21, and April 22. At each one of those public hearings, city departments are going to present their budget, what budget is being recommended for their budget. And residents are going to have a chance to come up to the microphone and make comments about each one of those departmental budgets. Then you're going to have an opportunity to ask questions of the departments. And that will happen in those 7 meetings. There's 2 or 3 or 4 departments each night. Then on April 28th, you'll have your final public hearing. By May 1st, by state law, you have to adopt the budget and a tax levy. So where you'll adopt the final tax levy will be April 28th. Remember, this is the maximum. You can go lower, can't go higher on April 28th. There's also ways for residents to comment besides showing up at those meetings. And remember, they can show up in person or virtually, but they also can make comments on the city website, or they can directly contact city council members. So with that, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Well, we are in a public hearing to talk about this property tax proposal and the fiscal year 27 proposed maximum property tax rate. So since we're in a public hearing, first we'll hear any comments from the public first, and then we will have discussion up here. So this is the moment where I'd invite anybody to come on up and share your thoughts on this. So it's just your name and address, if you would, please, for the record, and happy to take the time we need to get through everybody tonight.
Hi, my name's Leonard Dress, 541 Groveland Place, Dubuque. And I think it's time we gotta get to the zero raise. You know, if we need stuff, yeah, firemen, ambulance, city crews, yes. If it's stuff that we want, no. Homeowners are just getting tired of their taxes going up and up and up. When I built my house in '05, after the city took my old house for the water project, it was at $125,000. Now you took the value up to almost $250,000, and we say how little taxes went up. Value doubles, your taxes probably double, right? So I think you've got to get away from raising taxes at all. Unless if it's going to take and help the public safety, the fire, the ambulance, the police, the city crews, garbage, all that stuff. Totally for it. Anything that you want, I don't want. We don't need it. If we need it, let's go with it then. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard, for your comments. And if, just to keep things moving too, if anybody wants to come up, you can feel free to just line up over here if you want to be next in line. We'll hear from next person here, but if you're planning on making comments, feel free to form a line. It'll make it easier to come on up. Please.
All right. Clark Slows, 2925 Burlington Street. The thing I want to talk about was the interesting proposal of 0% for the average homeowner. I went back and looked, and that would result in about a $9.86 levy rate. And I was going, okay, based on what my taxable value went up to, I'm still going to have a 13% tax increase. I mean, that's in the dollars, 13% increase. So why should there be a certain class of home that has no tax increase, while us North Enders, who maybe don't have those higher end homes, have to pay double-digit rates? That's wrong. I would like Councilman Lindecker to justify why there should be a certain group that gets no tax increases while the rest of us get double-digit. That's not right. Also, too, some interesting things. You look on Facebook, the hot topic seems to be the climate action coordinator about, what that's costing. But I don't think nobody noticed, and I asked Mike before the meeting, that's not property tax dollars, that's federal dollars. So Mike may need to clarify that a little bit as, it got listed on the, decision-making sheet as, it had a net taxing, effect, property tax dollar. When it's not property tax dollars, it's federal dollars. So the one thing, that's 0% for the average homeowner. Let's be realistic. Are we going to see a $9.86 levy? No. There's a better chance of me becoming the next city manager than that happening. That's all I got.
Thank you, Clark, for your comments.
Good evening. Catherine Sorensen, 2613 Jackson. I'm just going to throw a bunch of different options out here. You're asking for 3%. The county's going to ask for 3%. The school districts are going to ask for 3%. Now we're at 9%. Everybody right now is going to ask for whatever they can get because of what the state is doing. So somebody's got to stand back and say, maybe we shouldn't be doing the 3% because we're paying for it. You guys are too. But we are. Everybody's feeling the gas prices. Everybody's feeling the grocery bills. Everybody's feeling the cost of living going up straight across the board. Nobody's getting a break. If you pass it, then you're looking at landlords are going to increase, leases are going to go up. If you have a business, who are you going to pass the cost off to? Your customers. And again, the people that shop and do things like that, we're going to end up paying for it anyway. So you have a couple other different options here. You currently have sitting in your general fund operating reserve budget close to $23 million, $22,790,000. That's what's sitting in there. Yes, you need to keep a proportion of that in there for whatever outstanding bond issues you have. Your rating will not go down if you choose to take the option and say, we're going to take that $2.1 million we need out of that. When you go for a bond issue and your bond underwriters are looking at you, they have 10 bullet points they look at. Number 1, your audits. Number 2, your budget. Number 3, have you cut costs, and so forth and so on. Your rating may impact your interest rates, but your AA rating is not going to tank because you took $2.1 million out of there instead of hitting us with the tax bill. Your other option with that also would be maybe not take the $2.1 million, maybe look at 50%. Instead of hitting us with $2.1 million, hit us with less than $1 million. Do $900,000, $1.1 million coming out of that operating. It's a reserve fund. You need to use it for maybe emergencies, but you're not looking at a bond issue anytime in the future. You're using it as it's sort of like your credit score. That's what it is. It's your credit score. And if you're taking out only $2.1 million out of $23 million, which will soon be $24 million, it's not going to hurt your credit score in any way, shape, or form. Something else I noted that we're going to take that $3.4 million out of TIF, and $1.2 million will come back to the city of Dubuque. Where is the other $2.2 million going? Is that going back to the county? Is that going back to the school districts? Because your TIF fund in 15 years generated $3.5 million in 15 years. It's amazing. But you're claiming, well, we took a loss of $9.2 million. So $34.5 million gained in your TIF fund. You took a loss of $9.2 million. You do the math on there, you're somewhere around $23 million profit still. You still had, because of the TIF versus what you lost from the state. So you have options other than just saying, oh, we're just going to give the taxpayers a 3%. Because honestly, we're tired. We're tired of adjusting our budgets. We're tired of figuring out food cost. We're tired of figuring out, okay, I got to make this trip because there's a family funeral. Now how much how much do I have to pay for gas? It's exhausting. And hitting us again on top of what we already know the county and the school districts are going to do is we need some compassion from somewhere. And we're going to ask you for that compassion because you're actually listening to us. Have a good night.
Thank you for your comments. Others?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. My name is Rob McDonald. I reside at 3399 Eagle Point Drive here in Dubuque. I'm here to just advocate for a 0% increase in the tax rate. It'd be nice if it was 0% average to everybody, but I'm trying to be realistic here. I've heard Mayor Kavanaugh speak about, during the budget process, people come up here and they ask for stuff. They want services. And that's true. But there's a lot of people that want less.
And of course, they don't have the, they're not into the details. They can't necessarily say cut this, cut that, although there are some opinions. But they basically, the adage, trim the fat. It's interesting, governmental bodies, they always talk about we have to raise taxes. You never hear we have to tighten the belt. You rarely hear that. In businesses, we can't just raise our prices because our customers will go elsewhere. So we have to be realistic about how we operate. So sure, there's going to be some increases. We're going to do things different, and we have to offset those with cuts in services or practices. Here's just one example. I don't have any numbers on it, but our greenhouse operation. It's very nice that the city has that, but I have a hard time believing that we can produce flowers more competitively than a commercial greenhouse. And I do know that we purchase flowers and different things in addition to what we grow in the greenhouse. And we've got buildings, equipment, overhead, workforce, then you got the inputs, you got the seeds, the soil, the fertilizer, da-da-da-da-da. I know we've had that greenhouse a long time, but I think that's a good place to look for some sort of cut. And I think a 0% increase in that tax rate would be a strong statement by this council to the citizens. And it'd be especially helpful to, as we know, the people on the north end, who are going to have higher than average increases based on values. We always see we have the lowest tax rate of the large 10 largest cities in Iowa. That's a great statistic. I wonder where we fall with fees. When we talk about water, sewer, stormwater, refuse, permitting, rental licenses, dog licenses, where do we line up? Because Waterloo is the highest, but they have the lowest rate for water and sewer of those same 10. So, there's play in there, but I think that would be a good thing for citizens to understand, because fees do fall into, comes out of the pocketbook, just like property taxes. And as far as those fees, so the enterprise funds, the water, sewer, stormwater, I have to think some of those funds come into the general fund. I know they have to support the operations of those departments, and I believe it's law that they have to be self-supporting. But the reason I ask this is because we have fallen way behind in sewer capacity. So obviously we weren't spending the money from those fees we collected, keeping up on the infrastructure needs, and now we're having to pay for it in large chunks. So it'd be interesting to hear about how much of the fees for water, sewer, and stormwater come into the general fund. And then finally, just for clarification, maybe it can be on when there's discussion, the improvement packages that were included. There's a expense column, makes sense, and then there's revenue. And I just, one of the things that I saw was the city manager, the upcoming budget for this city manager search. $50,000 seems like a reasonable, those things are expensive. But then there's a revenue column of $38,000. Now, I don't think we're going to make money doing that. So I'm sure there's an explanation. I think it'd be helpful if we heard what that revenue is, because my belief is it's coming from money we already have, we already taxed people on. And so we're bringing back in, but it shows less impact on this year's taxes. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your service.
Thank you for your comments. Others? Be happy to hear from anybody if you've got things to say. This will be your only moment to do that in tonight's public hearing. You will, as you can see, those of you sitting in the room, you can see the public meetings that we will have. We will have public input at every single one of those meetings, so you'll have the opportunity to speak then as well if you have something you want to say about specific departments. But this is a good opportunity if you have any thoughts to share.
My My name's Roger Welbus. I live at 165 West 24th Street. My concern is about property taxes. They're building all these apartment buildings for seniors. All right, they charge them $1,500 and $1,600 a month to rent an apartment. Most people on Social Security don't make that kind of money. If you keep raising taxes on them buildings, and landlords are going to raise taxes on the senior citizens, where are they going to go? Who's going to take care of all of them if they can't afford their rent? I don't think it makes any sense to put the senior citizens out when they've lived there their whole lives and they've paid taxes their whole lives. And a lot of them senior citizens made this city what it is today. That's all I got to say.
All right. Thank you for your comments. Okay. We have anything virtually, Adrian?
Just some written input submitted by the following: Chris Lutchsinger of 716 Peru Road, Mary Sand of 880 Goth Street, and Rob McDonald, 3399 Eagle Point Drive.
All right. Thank you, Adrian. Okay. Anyone further? Otherwise, I'm going to bring it back to us for discussion, and it'll be the end of any public input for the evening. Okay. Well, thanks to everyone who was able to speak and those who provided written input. Looking forward to getting more feedback here as we go through this process over the next month. So thank you for the many comments that we've received so far. So this has been helpful. This is, as we can see on the screen here, this is step number 2, really, in this whole process. So what we decide tonight, as Mike pointed out several times, is not necessarily final. There's a lot of discussion that we're going to have based on the public meetings that we have when we talk about each department's budget to be able to look at everything very specifically. So I want to make sure that I point that out first. And then for the sake of us as a council, there is a process that we follow through. If we do want to hold anything that we discuss for separate discussion. Basically what that means is if we find an item during any one of these public hearings that we're having that we would like to hold and talk about separately because we might want to either remove it from the budget or potentially add it, but it doesn't really look like we're going to do a lot of adding. That doesn't usually happen once we set this, since the rate is as high as it can go. So most likely, to remove it, there is a process that we follow. The city attorney has provided a memo for us on this, so I thought I'd let Krenna just explain that a little bit more, and then make sure that if we have any questions about this, I want to make sure we ask them now, because it just makes it clearer as we do this. And then, just so we all know too, if we do have any questions about this process as we go through it, don't hesitate to ask those questions. Let's make sure that we're clear on things so there's no confusion about when we should hold something or not hold something. Just feel free to ask those questions at any point in time as we go through this process. It's a long, drawn-out process for a reason, so that's good. So, Krenna, please.
Okay. So sadly, the state doesn't provide any guidance or rules about how all of your individual budget hearings are handled. And so you get to create your own process, essentially, for how things.
Can you pull the mic closer? I'm sorry, Krenna, I'm having
How's
trouble
that?
hearing you.
That
That's
better?
better, thank
Okay. So again, it's not specifically directed or guided by state code. So what we have done historically is we have polled city attorneys for the largest communities across the state to gather info on how they handle this. So we did city attorneys and we did city clerks. We asked if they had developed or well-developed processes for how items should be set aside during departmental presentations or hearings for consideration or amendment at the final budget hearing. From an attorney standpoint, those responding historically have been the city of Des Moines, West Des Moines, Iowa City, and Ames. Unfortunately, none of the responding cities had a clearly outlined process for how amendments are handled, and our process appears to be the most robust with the most number of hearings receiving public input. So what I've gathered is that the other cities handle changes like any other amendment processed by the city council with a voice vote. So if an amendment passes, it becomes part of the roll call vote on the budget as amended at the final budget hearing. That being said, as a body, you have the ability to agree upon how requests for further consideration, and by that I mean adding or deleting funding in the budget, will be handled. So I've identified a few ways this could occur. There may be other options that you all could see and agree to that I have not contemplated here. But what I have in my memo are 4 different possibilities for your consideration. The first is a single member holdover. So if one member of the body wants an item held for further discussion or consideration, the item is held for discussion at the final budget hearing. That's option 1. Option number 2 is a single member asks, a majority agrees, and then there's further consideration at the final budget hearing. That would be if one member wants an item held for further discussion or consideration, an informal poll of the body occurs, and if 4 members, majority agrees that the item should be held for discussion, it is held for discussion at the final budget hearing. If there are not 4 members in agreement that the items should be set aside for further consideration at the final budget hearing, it is not held over for further consideration. The option that number 3 is a single member ask, the majority agrees, and then there is budget hearing consideration. The difference there is not final budget hearing consideration. So if one member wants an item held for further discussion or consideration, an informal poll of the body occurs. Again, if 4 members agree the item should be held, the item is held for discussion at the end of the departmental budget hearings for the evening. So date by date on each of these evenings. If there are not 4 members in agreement, then it isn't held over for further consideration. There's an asterisk next to that item because I just need to note that if you opt for option 3, this would require adding an agenda item to each of the public hearing meeting agendas for consideration of the items held on that evening for discussion and resolution at the end of each of these evenings. Option number 4 is item by item motion, voice vote, like other cities do, where members could make motions at each of the hearings for specific items to be added or deleted from a departmental budget. The prevailing vote of the council would govern. Historically, option 2, which is the single member ask, majority agrees, the holdover discussion is held at the final budget hearing. That's option 2. That is historically what the body has opted for during this process. Any items that are set aside for further consideration during the budget process need to be discussed, resolved at or prior to the final budget hearing, prior to a vote on the final budget. Any changes to departmental budgets, increasing funding, would require an offset, decreasing funding somewhere else within the budget. The other thing that I have in here just for background information is the state program information, which Jenny or Laura could chime in on as they're more of an expert in these areas than I am. But the state does not allow the city to exceed the amount published in the public hearing notice for the planned expenditures in each of the 9 program areas in the final adopted budget. The 9 program areas defined by the state for reporting purposes include public safety, public works, health and social services, culture and recreation, community and economic development, general government, debt service, capital projects, and business type. The city has to assign its various cost centers to one of those state programs based on reporting guidelines that are prepared and provided by the Iowa Department of Management. In addition to that, the property tax levy adopted has to be equal or less than the property tax levy published in the notice of public hearing, and that's in accordance with the administrative rules that implement Iowa Code Chapters 384 and 388. There's a note on the state program areas that revising the budget recommendation, if the expense exceeds the state program amount published, that would require budget changes to be included in the first budget amendment of the new fiscal year. That's the general summary of your options.
So, with all that said, we can easily get those reminders from Krenna at any point in time. Because I think not to make too much of a joke, but some of this is as clear as mud sometimes when you're like trying to get through what you can hold and what you can't, and those, especially the bullet pointed list that you said there at the end. I think the big point that I want to stress is that tonight is the night that we decide the option that we want to choose for how we're going to hold things over. Krenna is correct that most of the time we've gone with option 2, where if, let's say on April 7th, during the first public hearing of a department, we say, all right, this one issue, we'd like to hold this, and one of us has that desire. So I could raise my hand and I could say, hey, I want to hold this issue with and I want to talk about it again as maybe something we do not add to the budget, and I'd like to talk about this at the final budget hearing. Would you all agree? And that is where we would take an informal vote of us, and it is majority rules in that case. So it would be the majority. If the majority says, yes, let's hold that item for a separate discussion at the final budget hearing and potentially not adopt that in the budget, then we hold it. If we do not agree to hold it, and we just don't have a majority to hold it, then the item is not held at that time. We can return to items. There's nothing that says we can't. There's no rule that says we can't go backwards and look at something and say, hey, I really want to talk about that again. But there are limits to that too. I mean, we're going to go through every single one of these departments. I do have a question, Krenna. If, for instance, we wanted to add just a informal discussion of the things that we had held so far. So pretend on April 13th, we have an informal discussion just to remind ourselves what items we have held and where we are in that process so far. Do we have to add that to an agenda to be able to do that?
It would be safest to do so, yes.
Okay. Would it make sense to be able to have an item just added to the agenda for every one of those public hearings, the 7th through the 22nd, just as an added item to discuss any items held? Sort of a hybrid of option 2 and 3?
Yes. I mean, to have it on the agenda is the safest way to allow those things to come up, but also to have a reminder to yourselves kind of where you're sitting, so that, for example, if somebody were doing kind of a cumulative tally of things that they wanted to add, the reminder of, okay, this is where we're at for things that we would like to add. There's going to have to be a corresponding reduction somewhere or changes.
So I'll open with this. I think we should do that. I think we should add an item to the agenda every single night from the April 7th through April 22nd. That is at the end of the night, to just review briefly any items that are held so far and keep a running tally of what those items are, so we're all clear on what those things are. It doesn't mean that we vote on those things that night. It means that they're held for the final hearing, but at least we have that discussion as a council so we kind of know where we are with things. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that. So my vote here would be option 2 with an item added to every single night's agenda just to review what items are being held at the end of the night. Mr. Resnick.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with what you just said. Item number 2 with an item in the agenda. I don't like item 3. We've thought about that because approving something that very night, we often don't have the information we need, and it's good to bring it back to the citizens. It's good to sleep on it. It's good to get more information about that. Number 2 is that we're going to set it aside for further discussion at the final meeting, and I think that's where it needs to occur. And of course, number 4 is even worse as far as let's just do it now, and we need to know the impact of that. So I keep it short. I agree with the mayor on these 2 aspects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Resnick. Ms. Wethel.
I would be in agreement with Councilmember Resnick and the mayor. One thing I do want to consider, however, if we're going to discuss at the end of each meeting, each public meeting, what is thus far held, we can ask questions, but the other department chairs of those questions will not be present. So I would say as council members, to submit questions to the city manager needs to be done, but we wouldn't have the expectation that every single department manager would be here each night just in case they were to be asked a question about an item that is held. Does that make sense? I just want to create expectations appropriately for city staff and department managers.
It makes sense to me. What I'm hearing is that your recognition that we're not going to have the department managers of every department here for every single budget hearing, because these are long discussions each night. So the departments themselves will be there, but not every department head will be expected to be there. Yeah, I think that's fair and understandable. Yeah, Mr.
I just want to make sure I don't misunderstand this. This is just a review of what we've done that night and other nights. There's no decision-making, there's no more information on those type of things happening that night. We're not going to get additional information during this agenda item from past nights. We're just saying, we've set aside this, we've set aside that. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Mayor?
It is, yeah. Yeah, I don't think I would expect deliberation at that time. But it might, to add to that though, it might be giving the finance department the information that they need to be tracking this stuff. And we might be able to give you some direction as the finance department to say that we're looking at this pretty seriously. We're going to need some new numbers in the budget based on the things that we're holding back here. So that's something, yeah. Okay, yeah, Ms. Russell.
I would agree with what's been said so far. This process has worked well in the past. I liked what Councilmember Resnick said, is that having time to think about it, because on the first night, an item might look like a good idea to remove from the budget, say. And then after you get more information and you find out what the impacts are, and you hear from your other council members, it's good to have that time to see how the overall process is going to make that final decision at the end. And I think having reminders throughout the process will be helpful as well. So I think it's a good system.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Rousseau. Mr. Staver, go ahead.
So if I'm hearing you right, so at the end, we could still kind of get more pointed on our questions and kind of deliver them collectively to each. The departments won't be here, but to kind of refine what we're questioning, right?
Yeah.
And then, so if I'm understanding, number 4 is we don't move on to the next. That's saying you don't move on to the next item until you decide that item that you're on. Is that right?
It would need to be decided in the moment, yes.
Right. You don't move on, you don't table nothing, you don't.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I think 2 sounds, with what you added, sounds like a good way to do it. I like the additional time to process.
I will add, Mr. Staver, something to clarify a question that you kind of asked there. I think asking questions about any items that were held, I think is allowable at any public hearing that we have. I think you can do that and continue to do that, but I also think that emailing the questions to the city manager to be able to be answered before we get to the public meeting is helpful if there's questions that you have throughout the process. Since it is such a long process, we have a lot of opportunities to ask questions. And there was a lot of deliberation and discussion in each one of these public hearings that we have. So you'll get a lot of opportunities to be able to talk about it. Where we make final decisions on those items held will be on April 28th.
So that's when you go line by line.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And by then, we normally have a pretty solid idea of where our heads are as a council. That's been my experience, at least, that we have a pretty solid idea on what's going to be in the budget, what is clearly there's a desire to remove it. Most of the time, that's the case by the time we get to the final budget hearing. Make sense? Okay. Mr. Spank, go ahead.
Yeah, I can agree with the second option. I just know as this goes on, as the process goes on, things can get lost, and it's nice to be reminded of what we've agreed upon talking about or what we want set aside. So yeah, I can deal with that one, because the item by item it could make things pretty difficult to make a decision in the moment when, as Mr. Resnick said, we don't know all the information set aside. So I'd be fine with number 2. So yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Mr. Leindecker, I'll come to you for any thoughts you have.
Yeah, I don't really have any thoughts on that per se. I do think, though, kind of as it relates to the levy, exactly, I do wonder, from what I've been able to research and understand, is other cities seems like they have more discussion and more working sessions before the levy. And so that just to have line of sight on what exactly we're looking at from a levy standpoint. Understood that, we have to set the levy first. But it seems like from other cities out there, they do have more working sessions and discussions about overall budget and processes beforehand. So,
Okay. So actually, we'll tackle that in a second. Are you okay with the option 2? I mean, I guess we have a majority already that says yes,
Yep.
but does that work for you as well?
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes, it does.
And then we'll come back to I'm gonna just park your levy question for a second and come right back to it. But so to close this out, this will be the process for us. It sounds like we're pretty clear on it. Any questions as we go through the process, feel free to ask them. And Krenna can always remind us of the rules as they are laid out in this particular memo. And then Krenna, you attached this memo to each of the public hearings as well, right?
I believe we have historically
could we
attached
please
it.
do that?
yes.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, I
But,
think.
but actually what I could do is I could summarize it and take the other options out and pare it down so that you're just looking at option 2 and what you all have agreed to.
There you go. Excellent. That'd be helpful. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, so that is the process. I think that's helpful for us, just knowing that going forward. Now I think I'd like to turn to the main discussion for the evening, which is the actual motion on the table, which is what Mr. Leindecker alluded to, and that is to approve the maximum property tax dollars as requested and as recommended by the city manager. And we do have a motion to receive and file and adopt that resolution. So now we can open up discussion on that matter. Mr. Leindecker, I'm going to come back to you if you don't mind. I'd like, since you kind of opened that discussion, I wouldn't mind hearing a few other thoughts. I'm not sure I'm clear on your point that you were making there.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. And first, I'd just like to thank the residents for speaking up here this evening. I feel like when our residents voice their opinions and hold us accountable, ultimately we make better decisions. So question is, before we set the total levy, where does council formally approve the spending decisions behind it?
So that is actually on the final night. So what we're doing now, what we've actually already done. So when we set the public hearing by state law, what we actually already did, and Krenna, you correct me please on any of these things that I say. But what we already did was we set the maximum rate that we can possibly set as of the previous meeting. So when we set the public hearing by law, we set a maximum rate. We cannot go any higher than the maximum rate. And that maximum rate is the rate that the city manager is recommending. So that we can't go any higher than what we've already decided. From this point on, we can only go lower. So we can only decrease the levy amount and the tax asking that we are, the tax increase that we are asking for. Does that answer that question?
And we have the full ability. Yeah, I appreciate that. And we have the full ability to go lower during the budgeting process and what we discussed and talked through. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yep. And I'll just point out too that in the past we have. I mean, that has happened where we've actually gone lower than where we started. But that final decision is made on the 28th of April. At the 28th of April, we make a decision, and that's the final one for the year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. All right. Other discussion, and this is where we talk about if we are okay with where this is set or not, and anything we want to talk about. So, Ms. Russell.
Thank you. I have one question, and then I have some comments that I wanted to share. First of all, as far as the reserves, I wondered if, I don't know, if Mike, if you or Jenny could clarify the reserve number. What is the impact of when we don't meet that reserve? And secondly, it looks like with the proposal, we are at the 20% with the margin of error, so that we are meeting the guidelines for our bond rating that then has many impacts to us in our borrowing capacity and impacts to the residents. Could you kind of clarify that for me? Are there funds that we could use, or are we at the maximum where we should be?
Jennifer Larson, Chief Financial Officer. So our policy is actually a reserve of 25%, and we keep that at about 27% just in case there are, calculation fluctuations there, because Moody's actually calculates on an accrual basis. So the 22 million sorry, so 24.6 million is at the 27%. It'd be slightly less if it was kept at exactly 25%, which is the policy that is set by council. So Moody's Investor Services, through prior ratings, has told us that, AAA rated cities have a 35% reserve to have that highest rating. So 25% is quite a bit below that. So that would be one opinion by the credit rating agency. And then I don't know if the city manager wants to talk more about this, but as part of this recommendation, there's an additional reserve being set aside for any property tax legislative items that may impact fiscal year '28. So in total, I think it's about 2.3 million once everything else is taken out of that.
Okay.
Well, the other thing I would say about the reserve is, you remember one of the reasons you have the reserve is in case there's some kind of emergency and an unanticipated emergency. You'll remember back to the pandemic. Now, fortunately, we didn't have to dig into our reserves at that time, but all the employees agreed to not take a pay raise that year. There was a bunch of equipment that we were going to purchase that we didn't purchase. So we dealt with it in other ways, but somebody like Moody's wants you to have a healthy reserve so that if something bad happens, you have money to deal with whatever that is. And, all kinds of things can happen. We all know that, between pandemics and tornadoes and who knows what else. So you want to have a reserve. But the other thing is, if you were to decide, well, $24.6 million is too much, so we want to reduce the reserve, that's fine, but I wouldn't recommend that you use that for recurring expenses, because if you do, what are we going to do next year? If it's a recurring expense, we'll have the expense again, but you won't have the extra reserves. So if you do that, if you lessen the reserves, I would encourage you to use the money for a non-recurring expense, like a capital purchase or a capital improvement project or something like that, but not to reduce the property tax levy, because you'll just dig a hole for next year that you'll have a real hard time getting out of.
Well, thank you for that clarification. I think that the budget is always a balancing act. So we can make sure that we provide the services that the residents expect and deserve while keeping those increases to a minimum. No one wants to pay more taxes. I don't want my friends and neighbors to pay more taxes, but we all still expect the city to deliver on the promises to serve us. And it would be easy to just vote no on this starting figure, but unless someone has already done the work to find the necessary savings to make that work, I think it's an empty promise. There are many challenges every year, just like in your home budget. The goods and services you have to purchase continue to increase. Legislative impacts certainly have play a part in that. And we work hard to control all that we can. So I encourage our residents to use all the online budget tools to provide their recommendations on how to best achieve that balance, and continue to contact us with their ideas, because as always, people that are closest to the issues have some of the best answers. So tune in and attend the budget hearings to get as much information as you can. I think a better solution is to support this recommended starting point that's developed by our staff experts. And then, with a watchful eye, we'll go through all the department budgets recommendations to look for potential savings and see what's necessary for safety, good roads and infrastructure, employee efficiency to serve our community to the best of our ability, quality of life expectations to attract and retain our population, and to be a quality workplace that attracts the best talent to serve our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rousseau. Mr. Resnick.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like a question about the reserve in the dollars and cents FY 2026 handout that we just have. It said that our spendable general fund cash reserved is at $32 million and is 37% of projected revenue. I'm just looking at it here. I mean, you mentioned that it's 27, but in the dollars and cents, it says it's 37.64%. Could you maybe tell me about that? Again, it says city spendable general fund cash reserve fund balance at 32 million some dollars. And that is 37.6% of projected revenue. So is our general fund balance 37% or 27%?
And just to clarify, because I'm seeing a few confused looks, that's last year's budget, right?
Well, it
Is what you're
says
looking at.
2020, FY '26.
Yeah, the last year's fiscal, the fiscal year that we're currently in is what you're talking about.
Right.
Okay.
So, but they said that, I've heard 27% tonight, that this is what we have. So I guess I'm just wanting to know about that.
Sure. Chief Financial Officer Jennifer Larson. So at the time the 26 budget was adopted, we would have had estimates used for what 2026's reserve balance would be. So since that time, it is now being projected at 27% for 26. So spending down the remainder of 26 fiscal year, that will bring us down to 27%.
You said 27% for 26, but for 26, but you mean the 27 budget. The projection is 27% for the fiscal year 27 budget, is that correct?
Going into 2027, so July 1.
Thank you.
Okay, because at the time, it says FY 2027 is estimated to be 37% as well. I'm just saying that it's quite a difference from, we projected it as 37%, it's actually 27%. That's millions of dollars, of course.
Right, so you're both right, by the way, so.
Mike, could you turn your mic towards your mouth a little bit? Sorry.
Sorry.
It's like sideways.
So you're both right. So as Jennifer said, at the beginning of the fiscal year, we projected that 37% for the current fiscal year. We're now projecting 27%. And then we're also projecting 27% for next year.
Okay, well, thank you very much. The budget is a reflection of the goals and priorities established in the fall. Is that correct, Mr. Van Milligan? This budget is, you take what the city council projects we have to do and other services that we have to do, and you make a budget based on our goals and priorities. Would you say that's basically true?
Yeah, that's how we do it every year. So at the end of every summer, you do a 3-day strategic planning process. And in that process, you establish your 5-year goals and your 1-year priorities. When you do that, and so you did that in late 2025, we take that information, share it with the department managers, with the boards and commissions, and say, okay, now what resources do you need to accomplish these 5-year goals and these 1-year priorities? And then these departments all submit requests. Here's what I need to make that happen. And then I go through the request, decide what kind of resource allocation I believe we have based on what I'm going to recommend for the property tax levy, and then I make a budget recommendation to you. So everything that everybody asked for just never happens because the requests are way more than the resources, and that's true again this year.
I guess, that's important, and it's a good process. But I really think that the city council adds to the amount we're spending this year, because we got down, instead of what I think is the most workable 10 goals, like we have in the past, 10 and 11, we ended with 15 goals. And I'm thinking, well, let's see what effect that has on the budget. Well, I think we can see what effect it has on the budget, because the more goals we have, the more money that, obviously, every one of those goals has a funding increase and a workload increase for city employees. And it's not that I want to eliminate 5 goals, because we voted on them together, and I'm not going to, suggest which ones we're not going to do. But I think we need to pursue these goals with a measured approach. Since we picked so many, And, you know, in these fiscally challenging times for our residents, some of them have, residents have come and talked with it, and so many other things going on. I think we need to really take ownership, City Council, of having 15 goals that we're asking for now. Well, you know, those are great goals. You know, how could we put them in, adopt them in a reasonable way? The other thing, Ms. Russell talked about the reserves, and it says that we're adding 2.4 million. My request, taking a 3% ask down to a 2% ask, has been calculated to be $300,000. And if you put 2.1 million in the reserves instead of 2.4 million, we're still increasing the reserves. We're just lessening the increase, and we're still at 27%. Even though our stated goal, as was mentioned, it's on the website and other places, is 25%. Even if we lower from 3% to 2%, we're still at 27% of our reserve. And we maintain that additional. So I think it's very reasonable. There may be some improvement packages, but I don't think we may find $300,000 less. We may. It depends on what's coming our way. But I think we need to, first of all, consider, City Council, that I think we're part of the situation, or maybe the process was. How we got to 15 goals instead of 10. That's a lot. And then the other thing is we can maintain our 27% extra, that's 2% extra, and then the stated goal of 25%. Why do we have a 25% stated goal if it really means 27%? I get it. I like reserve funds. I talk about them all the time. It's done great for our city. And what I'm requesting is, instead of, to think about over the time here, is a decrease from 2.4 million increase in the reserve to 2.1 million, which would bring us down to a 2% ask for residents. There's a lot of great information, a lot to think about. I really appreciate all the wonderful things that Mr. Van Milligan and his team has done through careful budgeting throughout the year. I think we live in an amazing community. Citizens care about this community, and there's so much going on. It's exciting times, and I think we need to, again, consider what I just mentioned going forward. And that's what I'm hoping we end up at tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Resnick. Ms. Weffa.
Ms. Larson, I think I just have a question for you regarding what Councilmember Resnick just asked, which is, what is the downside that you can hypothesize if we took $305,474 out of our reserves?
So I'm gonna ask Jennifer to not answer that question now, because I'll answer it. So if you take a one-time revenue source, like that $300,000 that was just mentioned, I'll just tell you, when I make my recommendation April 6th, I will take that $300,000 out of the recurring improvement packages. Because if I didn't do that, what you would be doing is digging yourself a $300,000 hole for next year's budget in this year's budget, and I think that's a mistake. So whatever you adopt, that's gonna tell us how much the resources are, and I'll use those resources to make the recommendation. I've already showed you in the improvement package list, if you adopt a 3% increase for the average homeowner, which improvement packages I'll be recommending and how much they would cost. If you reduce the resources, I'll reduce the recurring improvement package ones that I am recommending to you. Now, what you have to remember, you still have your 7 hearings. I can recommend whatever I want. You make the final decisions. So that decision wouldn't be made tonight by you, but it would be made at the end of April. And you may say, we're putting these all back in and we're gonna use reserves. I'll just remind you then, if you do that, okay, you just dug a $300,000 hole for next year's budget to start out. And so I think that when you dig a hole, it's hard to get out of.
And so if, Mr. Van Milligan, we were to line item, go through the budget of different departments and remove certain items, they need to be non-recurring? Is that,
They need to be recurring.
they need to be recurring?
Recurring
I'm sorry,
expenses.
yes, okay,
So for instance, personnel.
yes.
That's somebody that works here this year is going to get a salary. If they work here next year, they're getting that position is going to get a salary. If you remove that position, that's a recurring expense, and therefore it doesn't happen next year. And so then you can reduce the levy this year by that amount because it's not going to impact next year's levy.
It would need to be an item, not a person.
Well,
Something recurring that's a fee
recurring,
that
the
we would
salaries
have.
are recurring, so it can
Yeah.
be salaries,
Yeah.
or it could be something else that's recurring.
Okay, thank you for that. I just had a few statements I wanted to run through as I prepared for tonight, and honestly look forward to the future nights. I really do enjoy this part of being a council member. It really is a time in which people come to me with their passions, their thoughts, their worries about their own life here in Dubuque. And so please know I do truly appreciate that you would spend the night here with us tonight or took the time to reach out to us at home. Right now in the state of Iowa, the question is, what are you ready to defund? The counter to this would be that, as a previous federal administration stated, don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value. In other words, what do you hold dear? What are our beliefs and our priorities? For those that elected me, I want to leave no question in your mind of what I value. Public safety and prioritization of police, fire, and EMS needs. Public works and services, yes, that means infrastructure roads, but it also means ensuring safe water to drink and clean air to breathe. Investing in the incredible workforce that is City of Dubuque. Nurturing community. Believing that as extraordinary as Dubuque is in location and beauty, her true treasure is the people that live here. When we last discussed budget, there were 2 votes against the recommendations from the city staff on our maximum levy, and I certainly appreciate the civil discussion that night and that we've had here this evening. I do have a request for my council colleagues. If we want to cut the budget, then I would like to learn along the way what you want to cut from every night, from every department that comes in front of us to total the taxation you propose. So, as discussed at our previous meeting, there was a proposal to have no increase in residential city tax. In that case of no increase, it would mean that there would be a need to cut from the recommended budget $924,677. If there were to be a 2% tax increase rather than the proposed recommendation, that would mean to cut $305,474 from the current recommended budget. In a previous budget, when I came on to council, I asked to fund 1 additional firefighter that was requested but not recommended in the proposed budget. I asked for data regarding current staffing of our fire department, the years of service per firefighter, training timelines, goal of coverage. Before the final budget discussions, I spent hours going through individual departments and attempting to cut enough recurring costs to fund that position and make it budget neutral. I went through the process and I did so transparently. If one of us votes against the final budget, there must be an explanation of that council member that each and every step of the way, every night, You propose what you think should be cut to get to the tax proposal you endorse. I look forward in the nights to come, learning what each of you value and what each of you hold dear. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Sprague.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would like to get us down to 2% if that's possible. I'll look at all the lines like I always do when we get all of our lovely budget binders. And as always, I tell folks, come talk to me. Please tell me what you want to cut and give me a good reason why. Not just because you don't like it. I mean, a lot of these things are important services that we need. It's just when they're maybe a non-recurring, maybe there's something we can hold off on again. Maybe we can figure that out. But in the end, when folks say, well, just don't raise my taxes, I'm like, okay, fine. But we still need city services. We still need our police, our EMS, our streets, our sewers, all that things that you like your water to go away. We need all those things. So if folks want to tell me what to cut, I will look at it and give me a good reason why. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sprague. Mr. Staver, you have anything you'd like to add for tonight?
Yeah, I don't have any comments really prepared, but I did have a few questions. One thing I'm having a hard time understanding is that $5 million repayment in TIF loans, probably for Jenny, I would guess. So from what I've seen so far, when a project comes up, we vote on it to be, and where the funding comes from. So I'm assuming these were all originally set to be funded through TIF, and how they ended up not getting funded through TIF. And how long ago how old are these loans? And how did we get here? And why we didn't use the TIF in the first place? I guess the reason being is to me, it implies that we had the money to pay for these items, but I'm sure we asked for a levy that year as well. So to me, it suggests we didn't need the levy then if we had $5 million to pay for these projects that were supposed to be funded by TIF, and we didn't use the TIF.
Chief Financial Officer Jennifer Larson. So the way Iowa code works in regard to tax increment financing is you can't directly spend out of TIF funds for projects. So you have to create the debt before you can reimburse for that project. So you can't really reimburse in the same year for a project that you're doing because you have to certify it to the county auditor the next year as debt. So we're always having to use other funding sources to certify that debt, whether it's, something like the general fund, or we're actually issuing debt like a general obligation bond payable from TIF. But that's how those internal debts come to be. So, as the city manager and city council are prioritizing projects, it may come to a point during a budget process where we are aware we have this internal debt, but there's a higher priority project that wants to be done. And so those repayment of the internal debts were delayed so those projects could be done, like whether it was in the Millwork District or somewhere else in the city. So those projects vary in age as far as when they came on as internal debt, but I would say they're all probably within the last 7 to 10 years that they came on to the city.
And all those debts were certified and
Yes, so any expenditures that we do in an urban renewal area, we certify each year to the county. It's just in the case of an internal loan, we may internally decide not to repay ourselves right away.
And that came to city council to decide not to do that, or?
It would have been part of the budget recommendation. So as you're funding other, for example, projects in Greater Downtown TIF, that, funding coming in for Greater Downtown TIF was used to fund other council priority projects.
And so once we approve it to be funded through TIF, you can come back and say, listen, we're not going to use that TIF money, we're going to use it for something else, and then we'll make the decision here to do that?
So in this recommendation that will eventually come to council, $5.3 million in outstanding internal loans are repaid. And then as also part of this recommendation is the city manager recommending that we no longer collect 100% of Greater Downtown TIF. It's recommended that we only collect 75%. So there will be a lot less Greater Downtown TIF dollars for any projects.
That part really scares me, I guess, because of, for the city, I hate to say it this way, but to me, it creates value, for the 1.2 we're giving up over 3 that would go towards the projects and goals, 15 goals. To me, that's like, valued money. So that one really kind of bothers me. Obviously, the other, I guess, the paying back the loans, we need the money, so of course we'll do it. But I'd say the only other thing I would say is, it's kind of about setting our expectations, the expectations from the public when we set this levy. I kind of like, tasking ourselves with, the no net scenario where it's like, we're going to find the savings somewhere in this budget to offset, I would love to be 0, just again, to meet the expectation and set the tone for what we can accomplish. That way when we're making these decisions, we know what we're looking for, and there's no way out, there's no net. We have to find the savings. And then, whatever our top priorities, they get funded, but maybe not in the way we hoped. So, for me, setting the 1%, 2%, or 3%, for me, it's lower the better. But, I also understand this is my first time through this, and my hope is that through the budget process, we're looking at this like we're going for 0, Yeah, that's all I have really to say.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Staber.
Yep.
Mr. Leindecker, I'll come back to you in case you have anything else to add before we close out here.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Kavanaugh. And, I will say I fully agree with Councilmember Resnick on looking at the reserve for an area where we can, potentially have some savings in there, given the cushion that we have. Also fully understand and concur with the having a healthy reserve is important. As the Councilmember Wetzel's comments on making recommendations every night, if in fact my recommendation is 0, I think that regardless should be done by all of us every single night that we do meet in relation to the budget. I think it's our responsibility being good stewards to our taxpayer dollars and looking to sharpen the pencil when and where needed. I don't think that's any different than any of us do in our own respective lives, is constantly analyzing our own personal budgets. And that's my commitment to the residents of Dubuque, and looking forward to going forward on this budget discussion as we get into it. So I do think, there's opportunity for savings. And I'm committed to continue to look for those regardless of how the vote turns out tonight. So, and I look forward, like I said, I look forward to budget discussions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Leindecker. So I really appreciate this discussion, and I think this is a
Mr.
great
Mayor?
start. Please, Mike, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I don't think this has much impact on the discussion, but I want to point it out anyway, because Jennifer Larson pointed out to me on when I went through this slide and I said on the municipal assistance, the city lost $1.2 million a year in revenue. That was a combination of the entire reform that year, not just the municipal assistance. So that statement, while it was 1.2 million lost that year, it wasn't just on municipal assistance. And then, so when I said it was $5 million in revenue lost each year, it actually comes out to 3.8 million lost each year. But then she further pointed out to me that on this, the 2023 property tax overhaul, where they put a limits on the taxing ability of the council, that's a loss of, let's see, 2.9 million, I think is what the number is. So anyway, the total loss in annual revenue is not 5 million, it's 6.7 million. So I was low on one number, high on another number. I just wanted to point that out so you had the facts, as Jennifer sent me an email to correct what I said.
All right. In real time. All right. Thank you
Yeah,
very much,
thank you.
Mike. Appreciate that. We're going to get a lot of opportunities to ask lots of questions, have a lot more discussion. I just have one that has been burning, and I need to ask it. There's a suggestion tonight, actually, in some of the public comments, and then also in the paper not long ago, that there's going to be a difference in what everybody has to pay based on where you live in Dubuque. That there's going to be a different rate for you based on where you live in Dubuque. Can you help me understand that more clearly? I understand assessment differences. I understand that values of some homes can rise faster than values of other homes can rise. And I think what I'm hearing is that the values of some homes of specific value rose more quickly than homes of other values in this particular most recent assessment. But I'm trying to wrap my head around, if we set a levy rate, are we hurting one part of town more than we're hurting another part of town specifically?
So the levy rate will be the same for everybody, and you have no power over that. You can't say you want a different levy rate for one part of town than the other part of town, or one class of property over another class of property, like industrial versus residential. You don't have the authority to do that. But what does happen is when every 2 years, when the city assessor does the reassessment, there are areas of town where their values rise more than other areas of town. For instance, we heard several comments about the north end, that their values went up more. So based on this levy rate, they'll pay more in taxes. That's true. One of the things you have to look at is some of the reasons their values went up more. So the city spent $240 million to cure the flooding problems in the north end. Well, that's now drawing benefits for those people who live in those homes. The values of their homes are increasing. Now, you can look at that negatively or positively. The negative side is when your value increases, yes, you pay more in property taxes. The good side of it is probably the biggest investment in your life is in your home. And now that biggest investment is increasing in value. So someday when you sell that property, you're going to have more money. You're going to have accumulated more money by it increasing in value. So the fact that the city does invest in those neighborhoods in general, for instance, rebuilding Comiskey Park, spending I think it was like $6 million to do that, $240 million to cure flooding, and you can go on and on. That can in certain areas of town, especially the area that got protected now from flooding, is going to increase their values more. I see it as a positive. You could see it as a negative.
Yeah. And thank you, Mike. So it's a positive that people's homes are worth more, but the drawback of that in this particular moment is they might be hit harder if a tax increase happens to them in their property right now. So I think, first of all, I hope that you hear from us that the discussion that we plan to have is going to be a thorough one. I think we're going to have some late nights in April. It's going to be a long discussion that we're going to have, and I think that's a good thing. And I think it's worth it to be able to make sure that we're very clearly and very carefully trying to discuss what we're doing here. I also don't think it's lost on anybody up here that the things that we're hearing from residents about the cost pressure that we see right now. I have a really quick example of a road trip that I was forced to take last week, where in the course of a 3-day road trip, I basically saw my gas prices for my car that I was driving go up about over $1 in the places that I was going. It started off in one place, and by the end of the week, it was $1 more. And of course, that depends on which state you're in the moment. I understand that. But it hit me because those costs are very real, and they're things that we can't control. It's out of our control. Right now, we have some control in the seats that we're in, and I do think it's important that we strike the balance where we need to. I do think it's important that we are consistently looking on how to keep the tax pressure as low as we possibly can on our residents. At the same time, we are tasked with the responsibility of looking at how do we provide the services that our community needs and frankly, the services that our community wants. Those two things do matter in a place where you live. If you live in a place that only talks about what you need, a lot of people aren't drawn to that place. We talk a lot about things that are, we talk a lot about increasing our population, getting a larger group of people here. We know there are projects coming that are going to do that right now. There are a lot of things happening in Dubuque and in the region that are going to see more people coming to our region. We're going to be welcoming new Dubuquers, which is going to be great. But in order to do that, you have to have a place that draws people into. And it is a balance that we have to strike. And it's a hard one. It's not easy. It's just not easy to do, ever. It's just hard work. So I look forward to doing the hard work. I think it's important that we do it. I think it's important that we have honest and open and clear discussions about everything that we're doing here. And what I've learned in the process in these last few years of being here is that these discussions are very honest and open. I mean, it is what we do. We have a lot of time to be able to do this. So I'm looking forward to the discussions. I do hope that we can move this forward tonight so we can keep this going. So I plan to vote for this as it is right now, and then we'll move forward and discuss what we can to see where we could potentially reduce. Yeah, Ms.
Mr. Mayor,
Russell.
You know, earlier we talked about the process of pulling things out and holding them for later in the process. And Mr. Resnick had an idea of utilizing cash reserves for something. Is that an item that we could put on our list of things to consider as we're going forward?
Well, based on the process, what we would do is we would ask if we want to hold that item right now. And so we could do that if you're suggesting that.
I would like to suggest that we add to our list of potential savings to utilize cash reserves for an amount in the budget moving forward. Is anyone interested in?
I would second that.
I like that idea.
So we have a clear majority here to be able to do that. So yes, that will be held then for separate discussion going forward. Well, we have a majority, so yeah, we're there. And Mr. Leindecker, would you? Mr. Resnick's pointing at the ceiling. Mr. Leindecker, would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that is held. That will be on the list then, starting on the first public hearing. And I think we're not necessarily going to do that at our next meeting, which is April 6th, where we get the budget presentation from Mike. So, and I would caution us, I mean, at this moment, I think it's fine that we just did what we did, but I would caution us in making too many decisions before we've ever seen the budget proposal. We've seen nothing. The public has seen almost nothing of what this is going to be in this budget, and I think we need to make sure that we're looking at that. So on April 6th, we'll be doing that. But this item is held, so on April 7th, we'll revisit that item as the first held item. Okay? All right. Well, we do have a motion on the table, and in order to move us forward here,
Could I
motion, oh, please, Mr. Staver, yeah.
So could we reduce the percent asking right now, or is it yes or no to 3?
We could,
Oh, we could.
we could, absolutely. Yeah, we have that option.
Okay, I was just making sure.
Yep. Yeah, you mean going forward?
No, like right now.
Like right now, this moment? Yes, absolutely, we could do that right now. Is that the end of your question and statement?
Yeah, I was just making sure that
Okay.
was an option.
Yes, yeah, yep, it sure is. Okay. All right, anything further? All right, well, the motion here on the table is to receive and file and adopt this resolution. So Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Roussel,
Aye.
Staver,
Nay?
Kavanaugh,
Aye.
Sprank,
Aye.
Resnick,
No.
Leyendecker,
Okay.
Wethel.
Yay.
That motion passes 4-3. So with that, we have no further business on this agenda, so we will be back here on April 6th for our regular meeting and the first presentation of the city council budget.